job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Today we have on the show Georgina Hodgkinson, a CEO of Ask Dt.A, a tech consultancy and software development company creating solutions to help companies digitally transform and adapt. She's also been nominated for Women Business Leaders Digital Technology Award. And if that wasn't enough, being a CEO, being nominated, she is also a trainer, teacher, coach, mentor, and a mother of 5 children. Georgina, I thought I was doing well with 4 children, but you trumped me with that extra child. But thank you very much for taking the time out of your very, very busy day to be with us here.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for inviting me.
It's my absolute pleasure. With your background, there's bound to be lots and lots of questions that our listeners are going to have because it is so varied. And the women in tech area where you are is very, very close to your heart, I understand.
Yes, I mean, having addressed some of the challenges myself, it's trying to look at how we're moving forward, and there is still some of the same challenges, and it's how do we overcome that? How do we get a really talented work pool for the technology industry?
And I would take it you'd find that there's not as many women in the tech business as you would like.
Well, I've been to a number of different companies. I've freelanced. I also go to conferences, and we are still at that sort of 10% in some places. I mean, it's getting better in other places. We could even be 24%, but being the fact that it's 50% of the workforce, it's still running a bit low on numbers.
No. Okay. Well, you know what? We'll maybe get into some of that during this interview here we're having today. But before we do get into that, any person I bring on here, any of the guests, we ask them the same question at the very beginning. And it's just to let some of our listeners get to know you a little bit better. So what sort of hobby or hidden skill or talent, Georgina, do you have that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Oh, wow, that is a good question. As having 5 children, I have a lot of hobbies because I kind of like exploring and keeping that curiosity. So there's a lot of hobbies, and I don't kind of fit one particular, but hidden is I used to be a paintball instructor. And so I used to be able to run very fast. And so I used to set up games in forests, and yes, was able to set that up. But hobbies, I kind of now do it digitally. I can't run as fast as I could. Now I'm not willing to outrun paintballs any longer. But I kind of, just still games. And I think we learn through game and have fun. And it's that joie de vivre of life when we play games. So lots of games, board games, digital games. Yeah, that's probably one of my hobbies.
Georgina, I don't know how you set those up or went for that paintball idea. I've been on paintballing twice, and both times I've been left with severe bruising, aches and pains in nearly every joint, and always have said, I'm never going to do that again.
That's why
it's
run
almost
very
sadistic.
fast, Kevin.
No, I'm not. No, and even then I wasn't as fast as I would have liked to have been. But one occasion I got hit with friendly fire, and what I mean by that was that the guy in my team directly behind me just shot me in the head because he wanted to finish quick, so he just shot me anyway.
Yeah.
I would assume that happens.
Going to be over. Yeah. Capture the
That was
flag.
it.
We've done that. Let's Quit for lunch, yes.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it. I think he was in more pain and wanted to stop, but didn't want to get hit himself. So
Yeah,
he just
yeah,
decided to shoot me.
yeah, sometimes you do that, or you hide in bunkers and just, hopefully everybody else will get sort of hit before you do, and you can come out and just say, yep, game is over.
Georgina, I would never have suspected that you would have been a paintball instructor. That is very different to what you're currently doing right now. And just on a little side diversion, tell us something about this journey. You've obviously, you've been a paintballer, you've teacher, mentor, coach, you're now CEO of your own business. There must be somewhere along that line that you've had a real high moment that you thought, yeah, I've made it. Tell us a little bit about that if you can.
So all through my career, the sort of golden thread, if you like, is skills based and passing on skills. So it's all that serving and helping other people learn. So hence even the instructor it was to help people that were unemployed to motivate, move, and yeah, there's no better motivation than a paintball coming for you, maybe. But it was uh the the golden thread, as I say, is the skills. So probably the highest sort of achievement, personal achievement, is when you've got somebody that has given up and doesn't think that they can do it. And then they not only try through your own sort of, helping support and mentoring them, but then they go on and they're now achieving far more than what you even thought that they were going to. So that's a real high, as in you've made a difference and transformed somebody's life as a personal achievement. As a business or as an employee, you've got those ego moments that you may have. So at one point in my career, I was training the prince and princess of Kuwait on spreadsheets and in their sort of investment office in London. That was a high moment. That was a very different world to what I was used to, and it was an interesting world.
Hmm. What were they like?
Very, very nice people, very professional, and they were very structured and focused. Though it was investment, time was money, so it was
Hmm.
very to that point. It was, as I say, a very different world. Even back then, it was, plush carpet. I can't even imagine the thickness of this carpet in an office. Totally impractical for what you would have as lots of footfall through an office. But for their offices, it was all about image, what it represented, etc. So it was, yeah, a different world.
Wow. That's quite an experience that not very many people have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely one of the sort of ego moments, as I say, to kind of say that I've done that.
Yeah. So now to bring you back down to earth, Georgina, a little bit, there must also be that time of balance where times haven't been going so well and you've had sort of that pivotal moment and you thought, all right, something needs to change or I need to change or something. Do you have
Mm.
maybe an example of that you'd like to share?
Oh, there's been several, to be honest, but it's probably as a woman after having children and having a career break and looking at, well, what do I do next? What's my career going to look like with children? How do I balance that family life and as much as what I love working, how do I, square that circle really?
Hmm.
And it was also because I was in tech, uh, and having had that career break, maybe I don't know enough. The confidence had sort of
Hmm.
hit lower points, and there's also this sort of, with tech, it's very much a knowledge industry, and it's like I know more than you, and it's elbows out, and oh, it's easy, and the easier that you make it appear, the higher the prestige, etc., and that type of thing. So it doesn't help if you're feeling a little bit low. You can feel very quickly out of the loop.
And just touching on that, sort of, what did you do? What did you do to sort of after that career break when you were having those moments and just thought, I'm not sure, where do you go from here?
So you go through, it's almost like 5 stages of grief, I think. It's
Ah.
kind of the what was, and I sort of say BC, before children, not before COVID. And that was my life before. And what is it that I want to achieve now? So I have what does success look like? And that is not necessarily success as in my life, as in at the end of it, looking back and
Mm.
being Catholic, you kind of have this very easy sort of conversation about death, I suppose. But some people would be like, well, what do you want to do before you die? But I think as well, it's kind of this, we have to iterate all the time. So, what does it look like in the next year, in the
Mm.
next 5 years? And I think that's getting faster with technology and new jobs being created. So, it's kind of that what does success look like tomorrow? What does it
Mm.
look like in 6 months' time? So, your time frame changes.
Okay. So
Um,
it sounds a little bit like you've sort of chunked things down into manageable portions of life almost to say, well, okay, what does tomorrow look like? Let's not worry too much about 12 months or 18 months, but what does tomorrow look like? And you
that's it.
start small and then start building out from there.
Yeah, and it's if you're going through a phase where you are having to stay at home for children for whatever reason, that won't last forever. Having had
Mm.
my children grow up, I know that it goes relatively fast as well. So what can you do in the interim? And there's a number of things that I did to keep my skills up to date and that I got a good balance.
Hmm. And do you mind if I ask what some of those things were that you did to keep those skills up to date?
Yep. So I did a lot of self-development. So after my second child was born, I had already sort of gone through a lot of technical exams, the Microsoft Certified Systems
Hmm.
Engineer. I'd gone through a lot of the technical qualifications, as I say, but I was like, right, okay, I do need to be at home for a little while. So I started studying my degree with the Open University, so my computer degree. So that kept my mind going, even when I was playing Thomas the Tank Engine, and obviously whatever uh, uh, programs on the TV and make and do things, etc. But I was able to sort of keep a lot up to date with using my brain in the evening.
Yeah. And I think that's important, isn't it? It's just to continue that learning constantly. And I'm sure from those moments you learned a lot. And I don't mean academically learned a lot, but you probably learned a lot about yourself and about life in general. Was there anything that really stuck out for you with regards to that?
Well, when you're set with deadlines, you kind of realize what type of person you are and how organized you need to be.
Hmm.
And you learn lots of different skills. I'd almost say sometimes there's the joke as in I could run Amazon for the amount of parcels or children that I have to have in different locations at different times. So you learn lots of skills and you adapt and you find quicker ways of doing things when you're busier. And there's the old saying, you want something done, ask a busy person because they're not going to
Hmm.
necessarily overthink it or think, oh, wait a minute, I can do that in, whatever sort of bundle of time. Let's get this done and on to the next thing.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that analogy there. Most definitely. If you want something done, ask a busy person. They don't overthink it. They just get it done so that they can move on.
Yeah.
That's just fantastic. Now, in your roles as you've had coming through, and even in your current role now, I'm sure recruitment is always something that you're looking at or looking towards moving forward. Sitting on interview panels like
Mhm.
I do, I sort of see lots of people come in and out. But I always have this almost philosophy of they must have a particular value or set of values for me to sort of take them a bit serious.
Mhm.
Now, that's not to say that if you're absolutely fantastic at your job and you don't hit all of my values, that you may not get the job. But I am a heavily value-based person. What would one of your values be that you would love to see in a candidate if you were employing someone?
Oh, values are an excellent question. Sometimes you don't know your values, how strong they are until somebody goes against it. And then
Mm,
you instantly have that, that is a core value, that's a very strong value. And we when I'm looking for people that I want to associate with, that I want to be known around, etc., it's it's very similar values because we're not
mm,
all the same, but there's certain core ones, and it's that how we treat each other, how do we treat other people, and that human to human value and kindness, compassion. We're not all on our top game every single day. We have
mm,
moments, but it's kind of knowing that individual, what's their motivation, and where they're at. Everybody has that value and the reason behind it. So I go beyond behaviors sometimes, and it's a case of why it could be that they're tired, they've had a whole day before they've even seen me at 9 o'clock in the morning for whatever
mm.
reason, and their life is not necessarily the same as mine. So it's kind of going beyond what is being shown to you
Yeah.
and what it is. So I think I kind of uh, appreciate other people that have the similar value, that we are human, we're all trying to do our best. Most people don't get up and go, you know what, I'm going to make somebody miserable today.
Mm.
It's, they're just maybe trying to cope, or they're trying to do the best, what they think is the best in their day.
Yeah. And I would definitely agree with that. I think the majority of people do not get out of bed thinking I'm going to not do a good job today. They get up to do as good a job as they can.
Yeah.
And I think if more leaders thought in the manner of people are actually trying to do the best they can, it would be a different working environment for a lot of people, as opposed to trying to catch people doing something wrong. My suggestion would be leaders will try and catch people doing something right.
There's a great book, Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last,
Hmm.
and talks about exactly that. Try and catch them when they're doing something right and reward that behavior, which comes back to children. You can always find them when they're doing things that then they shouldn't be doing, but it's what behavior do you want more of, and you catch
Yeah,
them when they're doing that.
that's it. And you
Reward that.
reinforce that. Yeah, you
Exactly.
reinforce that. And I think even if we go one step further back, it's how we train dogs. We reward the good behavior.
Yep, that's it. Ignore and, play down, or, put that. That's not the person. That's just the behavior. That's not what
That's
we
it.
want. They've
Yeah.
learnt it from somewhere, and sometimes, embarrassingly, it may be from the parent or the owner, that's where they've kind of got that behavior from.
Well, Georgina, a little secret is it's usually the parent or the owner. Okay, so yes, it's
I also have a saying, no blame, no shame, but take responsibility. So let's take responsibility. Normally it is, especially when they have
absolutely.
the same accent or the same phrase. Normally you can kind of spot where it comes from.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard a few phrases and terms come back to you from your children. You've thought, "Oh, I don't like that," and then you realize it's actually yours.
You know what? Children are the best teachers as well of
They
our
are.
skills, definitely. And there's another saying, it's not my finest hour, but
Mm,
we
yeah.
do our best. We do our
We,
best.
we do our best. We do our best. And I suppose it's even like that interview process when you've got 10, 15 people going through that interview process and they're all trying to do their best in that interview. And
Hmm.
potentially we get down to the last two.
Hmm.
How do you personally decide which person? Hey, say let's say blue sky thinking, the same qualifications,
Hmm.
the same experience, the same skill set. How do you decide which one to choose?
I think this comes back to passion, is who wants it the most, who shows the most passion for the role. And because things change and you need to, as we've already said, self-develop, we need to learn on a constant basis. So what's going to keep you learning and what's going to keep you engaged in that and giving more than maybe just the hours? You've got the silent sort of withdrawal of jobs and the silent walking of job leavers. But so how do you counteract that? And I think it's passion. It's why are they there? What do they want to achieve? And I think this is where it comes back to matching as well, because sometimes they're just in the wrong place. They're doing the wrong role.
Mm.
And so it's not the fact that they're not skilled enough for the job or that they can't do the job. It's that what what is it that's going to keep them wanting to do that when things get a little bit tough or the extra is needed sometimes.
And you mentioned passion there. So what does passion look like during an interview?
So yeah, this good question. I think it's, are they willing to do things that are in their own time or what they consider their own time? Are they watching the clock? And it's a case of, because there is going to be times where you need to learn outside of your job hours. There's no contract that can sort of beat that. And
Mm.
especially in a tech industry, it's, why would you want to be part of that community? And so the passion is, you're wanting to be part of that world, spend more time. And that's not necessarily to say give up your balance
Mm.
of life as well, and your family life, but it's showing how does that work? How do you show that passion? Maybe it's is by doing blogs, maybe it's by being part of the community, yourself developing, and also just having that interest in not just A to B, but just, well, wait a minute, what is on the outskirts? What is going to affect that?
Mm. Would you think maybe a good way to demonstrate that passion might be through a question from the candidate to the interviewers?
Oh, yeah,
And
complete. Yeah.
yeah, and if so, have you ever had that happen to you when you sit on that panel and a candidate has asked you a question, you've went, "Oh, that's a great question."
Yeah, I'm trying to think as a specific example in as me interviewing somebody or somebody interviewing me. Which way round now?
You as the interviewer.
Okay. So there is a times that I would say that they ask what the working environment is like, what are the incentives to learn more, especially in tech. So have they got any sort of training, access to training, etc. So that type of thing, those questions. And I think one that sort of stands out is when they were sort of, do you get together socially as well, uh, after or before, or how do you build up that team? Because it's not just in the moment of office hours, if you like,
Hmm.
it's that collaboration. So I think that's when it's they're looking at it, how do they fit in to that environment.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. It's almost trying to understand where they are within the big picture.
Yeah.
What value can they bring? And also, is there an opportunity to further themselves and their career, not just within the workplace, but through the networking potentially inside and outside?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on interview panels as an interviewer, there's certain things that I might see or hear that will completely just turn me off a person coming in, a candidate coming in. What are your top three red flags for a candidate that is an absolute no-no? Now we've had answers like people walking in with a coffee in one hand and the keys in the other hand and their phone under their armpit and a bag in this arm, really disheveled as if they were running very, very late and then come in and dump everything and start. So that was an example someone gave. What are your three red flags?
Not that, because everybody has a different, and tech, maybe this is because I probably have been one of those candidates, as in it's luckily there's not a child under at one point or whatever, but it's everybody has a different life. So I think the probably the big red flag for me is the absolutes, as in I have to have things this way. I want things, and because we need to be very much a collaborative, and sometimes the teamwork is far more uh, important than, well, I'm going to do it and I can do it really fast on my own and without anybody else interfering. So I think that would be a red flag for me if somebody says I have to have something in a particular way.
Mhm.
um I'm trying to think as far as red flags. I don't try and go into absolutes, because I think it's it's trying to understand the individual. Each individual is going to have their benefits and why they're acting that way, and especially in the where we are at the moment is in a neurodiverse, we don't all present in the same way. So we have to kind of go a little bit further than that, just what is being presented. Why is it that they want it that way? So even though I've said no absolutes, it could be that they need structure in their life and they need quiet in order for them to code. So it's that's where I'd say it's trying to understand whether it's a need of theirs, or whether it's they've got into bad habits, I suppose. So it's
Hmm.
trying to understand the difference in that way, and how they would work part of the team. So that's where again it's trying to match with what the job is and what's needed. Is it going to be a lot of communication, and
Hmm.
are they going to be right for that role, as opposed to they may have all of the technology skills that are needed, but that is a crucial element of the job.
Yeah. And you and I both know that communication is so very important, regardless of what role you're currently doing or wanting to do.
And some roles you can get away with less if you've got
Hmm.
like a bridge, and that's fine, as in somebody to sort of be the sort of bridge between a very technical, not so communicative person. Um, but it's becoming more and more necessary that we need to have that understanding between teams.
Yeah. And it is a soft skill, but I think that doesn't do it justice calling it a soft skill. I really don't, because
No.
it is quite important. And I understand the use of a bridge, especially in the IT world,
Hmm.
because there is definitely experts in certain areas that will not know anything about another area because they are experts in that field. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's been able to translate that information to somebody who is not technical. That is a skill in itself. And I think we almost need to lose that soft from the soft skill and just have that as a skill or an essential skill to be able to.
we
transfer
do have a,
information.
yeah, we do have a sense of grading, don't we? As in it's
Yeah.
that, well, if it's a technical skill, and then if it's a soft skill, it's not as needed maybe, or it's
Mm,
less in some ways.
mm,
And so I'd rather sort of say maybe professional skills,
yeah.
business skills, as opposed
Yeah.
to soft. Yeah.
Yeah. It has a nice ring to it. Yeah. And it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent. The more individuals I speak to, more businesses I chat with, they are looking more of these business soft skills as even opposed to the technology skills. We can find people with technology skills. That is not the challenge. It is, will they fit into our culture? Will they fit into our environment? Will they be more of a hindrance than a help because they won't fit in? And
Mm.
that's where that soft skill really makes you stand out. Being able to communicate openly and easily, more times than not, those people get the job because it's the hard skills, those technical skills that get you to the interview, but it's the soft skills that get you the job. So it's explaining what you can do, explaining how you can transfer or translate information from one to another. You're doing that in the interview process. And if you can't do that there, there's almost that thought that, well, if you can't do that here, there's maybe a possibility they'll not be able to do that when they get into the role.
Yep, exactly. It's that there is that time frame of performance. How do they perform with that pressure? And although not necessarily in a real time and a real world environment, but exactly that, how do they present and show those skills in an interview, and
Hmm.
trying to get a glimpse of, because it's all risk, isn't it? You're trying to reduce
Yeah.
the risk when you employ somebody.
Yeah. And it is unfortunate. It is that risk mitigation as much as advantage and opportunity. But we were discussing there just very briefly about the candidates potentially standing out for the right reasons.
Hmm.
So how has there ever been one of those candidates that has went above and beyond the expectations when you're sitting there on that panel and you've thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but that is brilliant.
Yeah, I think there's been a few, and maybe it's the industry, as in it brings out sort of that competitiveness as well. But they've done so much research, and I'm like, I didn't even know that. And it's you learn as well sometimes from the interview process, as it's a two-way process. And so you learn that way, and also it's a case of their preparedness of how what they think that they're going to be asked, so they're ready for it in that way. So you can tell the research that they've done.
Okay. And that would be important to you that they have taken the time outside of the potential job role to upskill themselves in essence around your organization, your company, what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Well,
That'd be important.
it also shows the passion, because if you're
Mm,
applying for every job and you just want any job, but then it may be that there's a mismatch there. Why do they want to
mm,
work for you? Because every job is slightly different, even if it's got the same job title. It's how that's going to work in different companies where there's different strengths, or different ways of doing things, different cultures, like you say. So you want them to have a knowledge of what they're getting into as well, so that they feel that they're going to fit, because they bring their mindset with them, so that you can kind of then understand more, and you get more value, as in from the interview as well, because they already know the basics about your company as far as from an outside point of view, but you can tell that they're ready to want to go to that next stage.
yeah. And I think it's highly important that a candidate understands almost what is expected from them. And you don't always get that from the job description. Now, you might have to do a little bit of digging, ring the HR department if they have one, speak to previous employees, ring up even someone or go onto LinkedIn and chat with an employee who is currently there and ask them some questions around what's it like to actually work there
Mhm,
and
mhm,
understand the culture. This alone would save a lot of time and hassle because you'd probably find that, to use one of your phrases, we're trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole
mhm.
just because they want to, just because they need a job. It doesn't mean it's the right fit.
Yeah, exactly this. And that's where recruiters can come into their own as well, because they get to know, especially if it's a recruiter you've used quite often, they get to know your company, they get to know your culture and who else is already there. So they could help with that process as well.
Okay, thank you. Georgina, we're going to go for a little bit of a change in pace. We're going to do a little quick fire round. So there'll be some questions, and they're very simple questions, but they only need a yes, a no, or a pass. Okay? They don't need any explanation, just a yes, no, or pass.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Okay. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, good. Is it acceptable to wear pajamas, bottoms to a Zoom interview?
Yes.
Is it okay to bribe the interviewer?
No.
Is it wise to ask the interviewer for a selfie together at the end?
Yes.
Should a candidate smile during the interview?
Yes.
Should you answer the first question with a dramatic pause for effect?
No.
Should women wear high heels to an interview?
Pass.
Is it acceptable to ask the interviewer how much they make?
No.
Should you high five the interviewer at the end?
No.
Should a candidate swear during an interview?
Oh. Pass.
Is it acceptable to bring your mum to the interview for moral support?
No.
Okay, that's all of the questions. How did you find those, Georgina?
I want to explain some, but we'll leave it at yes and no and pass. But
Well,
that's
well, well, let's
another
let's go to your
one.
let's go to your passes then, okay?
Mhm.
You passed on the question, should women wear high heels to an interview?
Depends on the interview, and especially being in tech, I like social experiments, and I've been in a lot of technical roles, and sometimes you're judged on your technical ability by how grunge you look sometimes, and not necessarily the high heels you wear. So sometimes it's the trainers, you automatically appear more technical. It's not my rule, it's the rules of how it looks, etc. It might go back to the basement and glasses and geek days that people think that if
Mm.
you're technical, you wear the same t-shirt for weeks. So yeah, so it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do, and it can make you stand out, which is fine. It's also about how you want to show up. So
hmm
it's very much a case of how you feel confident, but it is also just being aware that there is a lot of unconscious bias out there.
There is, and I think that's very important for all of our listeners to understand that there is definitely unconscious bias. Unfortunately, no matter what you do, you can't you can't take that. You can take it into consideration, but you can't always mitigate against what may or may not happen because of it. We can only do our best. We can only give ourselves the best option and set ourselves up for success the best we can. Now, you passed on another one as well. Should a candidate swear during an interview?
Well, we had this conversation. I think it depends on maybe your generation. We were
Okay.
having this conversation. What seems to be a swear is not necessarily the same what we as a different generation would see. It's just an emphasis. However, there's that consideration as well for the team. And again, it's trying to sort of say, well, I'm aware that not everybody feels the same way. So I'm conscious of my language, not as in just swear language, but just the language that I'm using. So yes, but there's also no, so that's why I did a pass.
You're hedging your bets there. Yeah. Those particular questions, and the reason that they're asked is because I have been asked those questions by one or many interview candidates.
Mm.
And I know we giggled and we laughed as we were going through them, but they were very genuine at the time when they were
Yeah,
being
yeah,
asked.
yep,
And it just all it almost amazes me sometimes that people are this isn't common. As in there's certain questions there that aren't common sense.
yeah.
So
Well,
that
common
that
sense doesn't actually, the word doesn't actually, it's not very common sometimes. It's quite rare.
no, no. If it was common, everybody would have it.
Well, that's right, exactly.
It is. It is. Thank you very much, Georgina, for doing that. Now, the reason we're here today is that you have a lovely little story to tell us about your worst interview ever. Now, I haven't heard this yet, and our listeners haven't heard this yet, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have. So, Georgina, over to you. Tell us all about your worst interview ever.
Oh, well, this happened quite a few years ago. I won't say how many, but it was pre, I wasn't married. And in fact, it was my future husband that was interviewing me with somebody else. And it was the second interview. So I'd already gone through HR, the pre-interview, and this was the second, more detailed interview. And I was led up to a boardroom, and I was sat at the head of this boardroom table. And one person was on the right hand side, and my husband was on the left hand side. And I felt I was doing tennis, and they were both from very different. So one was from the business side, and my husband was from the technical side. And they also had these questions, but they were kind of disagreeing. So I was backwards and forwards several times. And halfway through, or partway through the interview, my husband, there was an incident and he had to leave the interview. And so at which point I was then just talking with the business person, and we got on well. We kind of aligned with what was wanted in the business, etc. And then my husband came back, and we then continued with this backwards and forwards, as in, well, what would you do? And as you've already discovered with my yes, no, or pass, it was, I sat on the fence with different ones, different conversation, and let them almost interview each other. So that was kind of maybe my worst sort of scenario, as in that way. But I did get the job, hence why I worked with my husband. But I found out I was actually the second choice. Now I'm not sure whether that's a good thing, as in some ways, because it's how you present yourself, etc. But what they were looking for from the business side and what they were looking from the technical side was, obviously they had a vision in their head of somebody that would meet both. And it it wasn't somebody that I could show in that scenario. So I suppose that was the worst interview, but funniest one in some ways.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I think businesses are becoming more and more like that. And what I mean by that is that they are looking for one person that can do everything. And I see this more and more and more when I look at a job description. And I look at a job description, and when you go down it and you say skills, experience, etc., 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 and you're thinking, my goodness, that is three people.
Yes.
They're looking all rolled into one. And I get it. They're trying to save money and they're trying to be more efficient, and I get that. But then the there's a conversation to be had with regards to companies now claiming that there is a skills shortage. There's no good people out there. But in actual fact, when you're looking for four or five different people in the one person, you're going to be stretched to find that complete diamond in the rough. And I think that's where a lot of organizations fall down.
Mm.
If they just step back a little bit, have a look at exactly what it is they need and want, they'll start to realize that they're looking for two people or three people. And what they're asking for is so far beyond normal expectations that they can now use the reasoning of there are no skilled people out there, there are no talented people out there, we're fishing in the wrong pond, whatever reason, excuse that they normally would use. When in actual fact, the responsibility and onus is on them to describe the role accurately and correctly. Because even if I was to look at a job description and I think, yeah, I can do a third of that, but I can't do those other three, there's no way I'm going to apply. Even if I am the absolute expert in that third, there's no way I'm going to apply because I can't do the other two thirds. And I think that puts a lot of people off straight away.
And there is even for the gender, there's a report out that if women don't meet all of the criteria, they're less likely,
Yeah.
and just from a risk-taking point, they're not going to put themselves through that. So and it's happening more and more all over, but technology as well, as in we want so many years of experience of a
Mm.
technology that may have only just come out, and it's how do you get that, and so it is obviously you want the best candidate, but this is where it comes back to passion again, as in you
Mm.
want the best candidate that's going to be not just now, and yes, obviously you want them to be able to perform as best as they can now, but how do you do that longevity as well, because most
Yeah.
businesses are going to be changing, transforming. What the task or what the ask is now may be slightly different in 6 months' time, especially with generative AI and all of the technologies that are happening. So it's that adaptability that we need to be recruiting for. And I do think that there's a big space needed for transformations of interviews, but maybe that's for another day, Kevin.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think the interview process is just that. It's just a process. And like everything else, if we have an ineffective process, it should surely be changed and updated. It has been running now for a very long time. If my memory serves me right, I think it was actually Henry Ford that created the very first interview, and it was just a very simple set of questions that he was looking for within a criteria, and that was it.
Mm. I
And
mean,
that has not
yeah.
changed really.
I think there is some change that's happening in the amount of interviews. Sometimes it's video only. They want to get
Mm.
to know you, so there's that video CV type thing that's happening. The video online, or the online video that we're now expected to do, but it's not a case of a one-time process. It's that maybe going through several stages that you're having to look at all the different criteria for a job, and it it needs to be two-way, because you're needing to fit into the job as much as what you need to make sure you're employing the best person at that time. But it definitely needs, even the experience on a CV, one person's job title cannot transfer directly to another same job title in another company.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate that that does happen, and it will happen because as I say to my clients, the interview is unfair, but it's unfair for everybody.
Mm,
And once you understand how the interview process works, you can at least take some action to do something about that. Prepare yourself better, train yourself up, get some coaching, get some support, get some mentoring, whatever it needs
mhm,
to do to make that leap into being a little bit more successful. But it's like everything, it's just a process. And once you
mm.
understand it, yeah, you can do something about it.
And your
Georgina,
chances go up when you do go for that interview, and you actually sit that interview. Your chances do go up.
they go up significantly actually if you've prepared well in advance. And it's I get a lot of clients that would ring me up on a Tuesday and say, "Can we have some coaching?" I say, "Yeah, absolutely. When's your interview?" They go, "Friday." I go, "No, no, that's far too short of a time frame for you to do what you need to do and do it properly."
Mm. And unfortunately, people are getting less notice as well. So
Yeah.
timeframes, this is where it is. Maybe not the first interview, it's getting interview ready, maybe even 6 months before you're willing to change your job, or
That's it.
again, in that way.
That's it. Because you never know when the job role will come up. Somebody will retire, somebody will move on, somebody will be promoted, somebody will just leave out of the blue, somebody will become sick. You never know. And it always, well, it doesn't always surprise me, but it surprises me still that people who want that next role haven't thought about it until it comes up or the possibility of it comes up. Where I'm a great believer in practice before you need it. Because when you do need it, you're ready. And you would look around and you see different people and you hear different people and you think, my goodness, that person's really, really good. Really, really good. But we didn't know that they were practicing for 6 months prior to that.
Well, that's where you act as if, isn't it? The
Correct.
state, you act as the new role that you want to be coming as.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's what does that need? What do I need to be able to be doing in order to have that position? So you do need to have that eye on what it is that's that next step.
Absolutely. And that's it, isn't it? It's just about planning and understanding the direction you want to go in and then putting things in place so that you can be ready as and when and if that comes up. Georgina, this has been a fantastic conversation and there's been a lot here to take away, but I want to try and give a couple of takeaways to the listeners that I have personally taken from what you've said. And my very first takeaway is to do your research and prepare. Really, really do your research and prepare because, like you had mentioned, you were a little shocked when someone mentioned something you didn't know about the company that you worked for. And that's a really, really good place to be as an interviewer. You're thinking, okay, this person has really went out of their way and made the effort to learn something that not even I knew about the company. And I've been here for a couple of years. And that sometimes is the difference between two candidates who are potentially similar. That person has done the extra research. Absolutely. The second one is showing that you are collaborative within the interview and not showing any sort of absolutes or demands that you'll put on because you seem to value teamwork and collaboration very highly, as most of us and all of us should, because we don't get to where we want to be without the support and guidance of others. We have all had to have someone help us along the way. And if someone is wanting to just do this all by themselves, they will be a handful. I have worked with people like that before who want to just do everything by themselves. And it's almost like a big secret, but they are also a single point of failure. So if anything else happens, if they're sick, if they fall down, if they decide that this isn't for them, they leave and you're in trouble. So they're not even spreading out that knowledge or skill set as well. And I'm a great believer in that. I'm a lifelong learner and I like to learn little bits from everybody. And even if that's not my speciality, I would still like to learn a little bit so that if and when something does happen, because life changes, that we will not be left going, what do we do now? Absolutely. But the biggest takeaway for me, and I think the biggest takeaway for the listeners should be around passion and how you demonstrate that passion within the interview. Asking the questions, smiling, being energetic within there, doing that extra piece of research, showing up early, understanding the company culture, phone calls beforehand, speaking with employees beforehand. All of that to me comes across as someone demonstrating that they have passion and they want to work there. And that is half the battle. Someone who actually wants to work there instead of needs to work there.
Yeah.
Because for that longevity that we discussed earlier, that is very, very important. So the passion for me is significantly important. Georgina, as I said, thank you. This has been absolutely fantastic. I have learnt so much. Our listeners will take away so much from this. And if our listeners want to reach out to you to find out more about what you do and the services you offer, where can they find out?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn with Georgina Hodgkinson.
Okay, that is wonderful. Thank you very much, Georgina.
Thank you, Kevin.
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.interviewskillscoach.co.uk/my-worst-interview-ever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.